You didn't click on this video by accident. I need you to actually sit with that for a second, because most people scroll past videos like this one. They see a title like this, and their thumb just keeps moving. But you stopped. Something made you stop. Maybe it's been a strange few weeks for you. Maybe you've been feeling like the ground under your life is a little softer than it used to be. Like nothing is technically wrong, but nothing feels settled either. Maybe you've had that odd sensation of being watched, not in a scary way, but in a way that almost feels like company. I'm going to name that feeling for you right now, because I don't believe in dancing around it. That presence has a name. Wisdom traditions far older than most modern religions called her Sophia. And if you're feeling her, she's already found you. I want to say this plainly, with full conviction, before we go any further. There is a moment in every person's life where something wiser than the everyday self reaches toward them. Not to control them, not to test them like a game show, to wake them up. Sophia is the name the oldest wisdom schools gave to that force, a divine current of insight that moves toward anyone finally ready to see clearly. Most people miss this moment entirely. Not because it isn't happening to them, it happens to almost everyone at some point, but because nobody ever taught them what it looks like. Nobody sat them down and said, when your life starts feeling like this, pay attention. So the signs get explained away. A weird dream gets blamed on pizza. A repeating number gets called a fluke. A gut feeling gets ignored because there's a deadline at work. That's exactly why so few people ever recognize their own awakening while it's happening. They only see it looking backward years later saying, oh, that's what that was. I don't want that for you. So today, I'm going to walk you through exactly what Sophia represents, what the real signs of being chosen look like. And I can tell you right now, it is not what most people assume, and what it means if you're standing inside one of these moments right now. Stay with me until the end, because the most important part of this isn't the beginning. It's what you do after. Let's start with the word itself, because words carry more weight than people give them credit for. Sophia is Greek. It simply means wisdom. No mystery in the translation. But in early Gnostic and Hellenistic wisdom traditions, spiritual and philosophical movements that flourished around the Mediterranean roughly 2,000 years ago, blending Greek philosophy with older mystical teachings, Sophia wasn't just a word for being smart. She was personified, given a presence, described almost like a living current of divine feminine intelligence that moves through creation itself, quietly nudging things toward understanding. I find that idea genuinely beautiful, and I'll tell you exactly why. So much of organized religion, historically, framed the divine as something distant. Something up there, judging down here, keeping score. Sophia was framed completely differently. She was framed as something that moves alongside you. Something that finds you in the ordinary parts of your life. In your thoughts at 2 in the morning, in the pattern you can't quite explain, in the pull you feel toward a truth you haven't said out loud yet. To me, that's a far more honest picture of how spiritual awakening actually feels. It rarely arrives like thunder. It arrives like a whisper you almost miss, tucked inside a Tuesday afternoon that otherwise felt completely unremarkable. In these old texts, Sophia isn't just wisdom sitting quietly in a temple somewhere, waiting to be admired. She's active. She searches. Some of the oldest surviving writings describe her as grieving her own separation from higher understanding, and moving through the world trying to gather fragments of that understanding back together. Through people, through moments, through you, if we're being honest about what this teaching implies. I'm not asking you to take any of this as literal doctrine. I'm asking you to sit with the feeling underneath it, because that feeling is the actual point. Whether you frame this as a mythological figure, a psychological archetype, or simply a poetic description of your own inner wisdom trying to reach you, the pattern underneath stays exactly the same. Something wants to be noticed, and it rarely announces itself loudly. It shows up in the small, strange details of an ordinary day, waiting patiently for you to slow down enough to catch it. I think that's actually the hardest part for most people. Not believing in Sophia. Believing that something this quiet could possibly be this important. Which brings us to the first sign. Sign 1. The old life stops fitting. Have you ever put on a piece of clothing you used to wear all the time, and it just doesn't sit right anymore? Not because it doesn't fit your body, because it doesn't fit you. That's exactly what this second sign feels like, except it isn't about clothes. It's about your entire life. Friendships that used to feel easy start feeling like effort. Conversations that used to interest you start feeling small, almost like background noise. A job you used to tolerate suddenly feels unbearable, even though nothing about the job itself actually changed. I personally believe this happens because you changed quietly on the inside, before your outer life had any chance to catch up to you. This is usually the stage where people panic a little, and I understand why. They think something is wrong with them. I don't think that at all. I think this is one of the clearest signs that an awakening is already underway, whether you gave it permission or not. The old version of your life is not being punished. It's simply too small for the version of you that's currently forming underneath the surface. I know this stage is uncomfortable because loss, even quiet loss, still feels like loss. You might grieve a friendship that hasn't technically ended yet. You might mourn a version of yourself you haven't fully let go of. That grief is real, and I don't think you should rush past it just because the growth on the other side is supposedly worth it. But I want you to hear this clearly, because it's something I genuinely believe. Outgrowing something is not the same as failing at it. A shell doesn't fail because a bird outgrows it. It simply did its job. Your old life did its job too. It carried you here to this exact moment, listening to this exact video. Don't be ashamed of what got you this far, even the parts that no longer fit. I think people get this stage backward all the time. They assume that if something used to work and now it doesn't, they must have done something wrong along the way. I don't see it that way at all. I see it as evidence that you actually grew, which is rarer than people admit. Plenty of people stay the same size their entire lives just so nothing around them has to shift. The fact that your life feels tight right now might be the most honest compliment your own growth could give you. Sign 2. Dreams and the in-between feeling. Have your dreams felt different lately? Not necessarily scarier, just more vivid, more symbolic, like your mind is speaking to you in a language it doesn't usually use, one you're only half fluent in. This is the sign I personally find the most fascinating out of all of them, because dream symbolism shows up across nearly every ancient wisdom tradition, independently, all pointing toward the same idea, that dreams are one of the oldest doorways between the ordinary mind and something wiser underneath it. Ancient wisdom schools treated dreams almost like a threshold, a place where the everyday self steps back, just for a few hours, and something older finally gets a chance to speak without interruption. During this stage, a lot of people describe a strange in-between feeling even while wide awake, like standing in a doorway between two rooms, belonging fully to neither one. The old identity sits behind you. The new one isn't finished yet. It's disorienting, and I won't pretend otherwise. Some days it can feel almost lonely, like you don't fully belong to your old friendships anymore, but you haven't quite grown into whatever comes next either. But it's also, in my opinion, one of the most honest places a person can stand. You're not pretending to be who you used to be anymore, and you're not fully who you're becoming yet either. You're just between, and between, uncomfortable as it is where real transformation actually happens. Nobody transforms while standing still in a room they've already outgrown. If you've been waking up remembering dreams you normally forget, or feeling like certain dreams stayed with you all day like a mood you can't shake, I don't think that's random either. I think that's Sophia speaking in the only language your resting mind knows how to hear clearly. Sign 3. Synchronicity feels personal. I think this is the sign people talk themselves out of the fastest, and honestly, it used to happen to me too. You glance at a clock and it's 11:11. You dismiss it. Then it happens again the next day, and the day after that. At some point, coincidence stops feeling like the right word, doesn't it? Here's where I'll give you my honest opinion, and I hold this one pretty firmly. I don't think synchronicity is random. I think it's language. Not language made of letters, but language made of pattern and timing. When the same number, the same song, the same stranger's sentence keeps crossing your path in a short window of time, something in you already knows it means something. That knowing shows up before your logical brain even gets a chance to explain it away. Here's the part that matters most, though, and I really want you to hear this clearly. It's not really about the number itself. It's about the feeling that arrives alongside it. A small drop in your stomach. A tiny chill on your arms. A thought that says, quiet but completely certain, that was for me. That reaction is the actual sign. The number is just the messenger carrying it. I want to be careful here, because I'm not telling you that every coincidence is cosmic. Some things really are just chance, and treating every red light and grocery receipt like a divine message will exhaust you fast. But when the pattern repeats, and it lines up with a moment you're already questioning something, a relationship, a decision, a direction you've been avoiding, that's usually not chance. That's usually your own deeper wisdom, or if you prefer the older language, Sophia herself, trying to get your attention the gentlest way possible before life has to get louder to reach you. I've noticed something else too, something I don't think gets talked about enough. These synchronicities tend to cluster right before a decision you've been putting off. Almost like the pattern is trying to nudge you toward a choice your logical mind keeps circling without landing on. Pay attention to what you were thinking about right before the number showed up. That's usually where the real message is hiding. I remember a stretch of my own life where a particular song kept playing everywhere I went. In stores, in cars I wasn't even driving, in the background of videos I hadn't chosen. I brushed it off for weeks. Looking back, that song was tied to a decision I was scared to make. I don't think that's a coincidence anymore. I think it was Sophia using the only volume I was actually willing to listen at. Picture this for a second. You're sitting on the bathroom floor at 4 in the morning. The tile is cold under you. The house is silent except for your own breathing, which somehow feels louder than it should. Nothing catastrophic happened that day. No emergency. No tragedy. And yet you feel like something inside your chest has quietly cracked open, and you don't have words for why. You're not sick. You're not broken. But everything, all at once, quietly feels like too much to carry. If that scene means something to you, if some version of that night has happened to you before, maybe more than once, I need you to hear this next part carefully, because it's the part almost nobody explains properly. Here's my honest opinion, and I say this with real conviction. Being chosen is almost never comfortable at first. Nearly every wisdom tradition I've studied describes some version of a stripping away stage before clarity finally arrives. A dark night before the actual dawn. Not a punishment. A clearing. I think this is exactly where most people quit, and it genuinely breaks my heart a little when I think about how many almost make it through. They mistake the discomfort for a sign that something has gone wrong, instead of a sign that something old is finally being released from its grip. They grab for anything that makes the feelings stop, distraction, numbing, forcing the old life back into place like duct tape on a crack, instead of letting the floor fall away long enough to find what's actually underneath them. I'm not saying suffering is required for growth. I genuinely don't believe pain is some kind of toll you're forced to pay before you're allowed peace. But I do believe discomfort, when it shows up like this, unexplained and undeniable, is often the exact moment where real change is quietly asking to be let in. The bathroom floor isn't the end of the story. In almost every case I've come across, it's the turning point, even when it doesn't feel like one at the time. If you're in that moment right now, I want you to know something. This isn't proof that you're falling apart. It's often proof that something is finally being asked to fall away. I also think it matters what you do with yourself in that exact moment, sitting there on the cold floor. Not what you decide, not some big life-altering choice made at 4 in the morning. Just whether you let yourself feel it instead of running from it. In my experience, the people who eventually come out the other side clearer aren't the ones who avoided the floor entirely. They're the ones who sat there long enough to stop being afraid of it. I want to clear something up right now, because I think this is where the title of this video could genuinely mislead you if I don't correct it directly and honestly. Being chosen does not mean you're special in the way people usually picture that word. It does not mean superior. It does not mean above other people, more important, or somehow exempt from struggle. If anything, I think that idea has caused real harm in spiritual spaces. This notion that awakening makes someone better than everyone around them, more enlightened, more evolved, looking down instead of reaching out. Here's what I actually believe being chosen means. It means being handed an invitation toward responsibility. An invitation to see more clearly, feel more honestly, and carry a little more awareness than you did before. That's it. That's the whole prize. Not comfort, not certainty, not a shortcut around pain. Awareness, and everything that comes with holding it steady. That might sound less exciting than what the title promised you, but I'd argue it's actually far more meaningful, because awareness is the one thing that genuinely changes a life from the inside out. Not luck, not fate, not some cosmic lottery you happen to win. Awareness, chosen and practiced, day after day. Sophia in the old texts isn't described as choosing favorites the way people choose a favorite child. She's described as reaching toward anyone willing to look a little closer at their own life, anyone willing to sit in discomfort long enough to actually learn something from it. The invitation itself isn't rare. What's rare is someone actually accepting it instead of looking away and reaching for the remote control instead. I firmly believe you already know, somewhere underneath the noise, whether you've been avoiding your own invitation. I think most of us do. I want to take you a little deeper here, because this part genuinely changed how I personally see spiritual teachings in general, not just this one. Ancient wisdom schools rarely handed knowledge over directly, plainly, on a silver platter. They coded it, wrapped it inside myth, symbol, and story, instead of blunt instruction. Some historians believe this was practical. Spoken teaching survived and traveled better than written record in certain periods, and stories are simply easier to remember than lists of rules. But I personally think there was a deeper reason too, one that goes beyond convenience. Truth that's simply told tends to be forgotten within a week. Truth that's discovered tends to be lived for a lifetime. That's actually reflected directly in how Sophia herself is described in these old texts. Not loud, not obvious, described as hidden, something you had to genuinely seek before she revealed herself to you, something that didn't chase you down the street shouting for attention. I don't think that's poetic decoration. I think it's an accurate description of how real wisdom still works today, in your life, right now. It doesn't shout over the noise of your day. It waits patiently underneath it, for the exact moment you finally get quiet enough to notice it was there the whole time. This is part of why so much of this knowledge feels obscure now, buried, hard to find, almost forgotten. It was never designed to be handed out casually to anyone scrolling past. It was designed to be found by the people who were finally ready to stop, sit still, and actually look. I think that's exactly what you're doing right now, whether you fully realize it yet or not. There's something else I find quietly remarkable about this. Nearly every ancient culture that developed a concept like Sophia arrived at it independently, without borrowing the idea from one another. Different languages, different continents, different centuries, and yet the same underlying pattern kept surfacing. A wise, searching presence, hidden in plain sight, waiting to be found by whoever finally slowed down enough to look. I don't think that's coincidence either. I think it's evidence that this pattern is describing something real about how human beings actually wake up, not just a story one culture happened to invent and everyone else copied. I want to be honest with you for a moment, because I genuinely think you deserve that after sticking with me this far into the video. I didn't make this video because I have all of this figured out. I made it because I recognize this pattern in my own life, more than once, in more than one season of my own story, and I wish someone had explained it to me clearly the very first time it happened, instead of leaving me to piece it together years later, alone in hindsight. I'm not asking you to believe every single piece of this with total certainty. I'm asking you to notice if any part of it resonated with something you've already felt, but never quite had the language for. That resonance matters more than my opinion ever could. If something in this video landed in your chest a little, even faintly, that's genuinely worth paying attention to. That's not me convincing you of something through clever words. That's you recognizing something that was already sitting there, quietly waiting, long before you ever pressed play on this video. I think we underestimate how much our own bodies already know before our minds catch up. Trust that a little more than you have been. I also think we're too quick to dismiss our own experiences just because we can't immediately explain them with logic. You don't need a perfect explanation to trust a feeling that's been consistent for weeks or months. Certainty tends to come later, after the trusting, not before it. So let's say some of this genuinely applies to you right now, sitting there listening. What actually helps, practically, starting today? Start simple. Give yourself real stillness, even just 10 quiet minutes without a screen anywhere near your hand. Most people are so busy filling every silence with noise that they never give their own wisdom any room to actually speak up. Write things down, not for anyone else to read. Dreams, strange coincidences, the moments that unsettle you in a way you can't fully explain in the moment. Patterns become obvious on paper in a way they almost never do while they're just spinning around inside your own head. And maybe most importantly, stop forcing an old life to keep fitting when it clearly doesn't anymore. You don't have to burn anything down dramatically or announce some big transformation to everyone you know. Just stop gripping so tightly. Let a little space open up, quietly, without fanfare. That space is usually exactly where clarity finally has room to arrive and settle in. Give yourself permission to move slowly through this. Awakening isn't a race, and nobody actually wins by rushing it. One more thing I'd add, and I say this as someone who learned it the hard way. Don't isolate yourself completely during this stage, even though the pull to do that can feel strong. You don't need a crowd. You just need one or two people who won't ask you to explain everything perfectly before they'll simply sit with you in it. Awakening doesn't have to happen alone just because it happens quietly. You didn't click on this video by accident. I said that at the very beginning, And I mean it even more now that we've come this far together, you and me. Whatever's been happening in your life lately, the strange repeating numbers, the friendships that suddenly feel distant, the dreams that won't quite leave you alone, even the nights that feel heavier than they reasonably should. I don't think that's random. I think something in you is finally ready to be seen. Not by anyone else watching from the outside, by you. Tell me in the comments which sign hit closest to home for you. I read every single one, and honestly, some of the most meaningful conversations I've ever had have started right there in that comment section, from strangers who turned out to have more in common than either of us expected. If this video found you at exactly the right moment, consider subscribing, because this channel is exactly where I dig into this kind of thing, divine feminine wisdom that's been quietly buried, overlooked, or deliberately kept out of the story most of us were handed. One honest layer at a time, together.